welcome back again. Today we have Ratna Osman. She's the Executive Director of Sisters in Islam for our Blast from the Grassroots slot today. She will be speaking on the rights of Muslim women under the Sharia law. So, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Arlene. I'm good. Thank you. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, so first of all, so Muslim women in Malaysia are generally being seen as the oppressed one, especially when it comes to Sharia law. But what is Sharia law after all?
Maybe not oppressed because if you want to compare,
I have to put quote unquote.
Yeah, you want to compare with other Muslim women in the Islamic world, then we are actually quite fortunate and blessed because we are in a developing country and we don't have such strict rules like no driving and compulsory to cover in public. Yeah. But yes, we do have our own issues in the Islamic law in Malaysia itself.
Mm-hmm. But why people always see Muslim women being faced heavy discriminations under the Sharia law? I mean, in what aspect that people have that sort of perception?
Yeah, it is most unfortunate whenever globally people are talking about Muslim women, then they see Muslim women as this subordinate, subjugated, being owned by either their family male family members, or after she's married, then she's it's on her duty to obey her husband. And that is the how Muslim women are perceived globally sometimes, which is quite wrong, because if you look when Islam came to Arabia 1,400 years ago, it was actually to give more rights, and giving rights that were never heard of for Muslim women: inheritance, right to education, right to have your own contract, and right to have a say in marriage as well. Equality. God talk about Muslim men and Muslim women being awliya, or protector of one another. This kind of language was unthinkable back in the 7th century. And yet today, why is it that whenever we talk about Muslim women and their rights, it's as if like it's oxymoron.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't talk about Muslim women's rights because there ain't any rights in Islam for Muslim women except they are like being owned. So I'd like to dispel that information, because it is actually untrue. There are a lot of rights in Quran, in the tradition of the Prophet, talking about Muslim women. Unfortunately, you are right, Arlene. The situation today is that Muslim women are not being given their rights.
So when you say that Muslim women are not being given their rights, is it mostly cultural, or is it actually based on the Quran?
It is not based on Quran. It's based on interpretation of human beings on what God said in Quran. Let's say on aspects of marriage, on aspects of even criminal law. A lot of evolution in the Islamic jurisprudence have allowed patriarchal interpretation of the Quran to be the majority opinion of ulama, and this has a very negative impact on Muslim women's rights. Like I said, because then the whole understanding of what is Sharia, which is God's divine message in Quran, and what is actually fiqh, which is Islamic jurisprudence. It's human interpretation, humans exercise, it's science, legal science, to derive legal rulings based on Quran and Sunnah.
I see.
It's a human construct. It's a human effort. It changes from one society to another. And unfortunately, this whole fiqh exercise or Islamic jurisprudence exercise has been blanket over and named Sharia. And when you say Sharia, then the language today, the understanding today is that, oh, this is Sharia. It cannot be questioned because it is from God. But if you look at all a lot of 90% of the Islamic laws today that we have here in the Muslim world,
90%,
90% of the laws that we have in the Muslim world, the words in this, in the legal document itself, it's not even in Quran.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Even the word hudud itself, you cannot find it in the Quran.
The word hudud, yes, it is, strangely enough, the word hudud actually concentrate on limits of moral or legal acceptable behavior. There are a lot of word of had, it's not hudud itself. It's in the Quran it say had tilka hududullah. This is the limit of Allah, and it mostly correspond on inheritance, on marital relationships.
So not criminal laws.
Not criminal law. But it is, I mean, of course, in Quran, it does mention about, an eye for an eye, a life for a life. But, it talks about justice and the concept of justice. And this is where Islamists or conservative Muslims do not like this language because they say this is to say that Quran is not relevant today. Yeah, but we beg to differ. Sisters in Islam's work have always been clear that you have to understand Quran from the context, from the asbabun nuzul, the reason for the revelation. So in Quran it talks about there are mentions of specific punishments, but it is not to say that these are the only punishments that you can implement even in 21st century Malaysia. But these, the spirit or the message which is in those verses are to attain justice.
I see. Unfortunately, this is just based on my rough survey. Talking to people, it seems like the traditional or the conservative interpretation of Islam or even the Sharia law seems to be the majority view of Muslim and even non-Muslim to a certain extent. And people who have a different sort of interpretation of Islam, people who are much more liberal in their views on what Islam ought to be or what Islam should be interpreted, seems to be seen as the apologies. So, what is your view on this? I mean, in that sense, what Islam is in that sense? I just want to know the fundamentals of it.
Yes, very true, Arlene. There are people, especially we term them as the conservative, the traditionalists, or the Islamist. They do believe that Quran needs to be implemented word for word. And the whole underlying argument that the liberals or the moderate progressive Muslims have always tried to push is that Quran talks about justice. The first that you need to do is to look at justice, and that's why even in Surah Al-Ma'idah verse 8 it says that do just because that is nearer to you in taqwa, nearer to you to God. So if, let's say, this Islamic punishment, if the context or the evolvement of society today have understood justice at a different level, we have different sets of laws, we have different method of curbing crimes, or of punishment or imprisonment. So we actually need to adhere to that and not to go back to sets of punishment that, yes, Allah mentioned in Quran, but it wasn't something that was created by Quran. All the hudud punishment.
I see.
let's say from amputation or even lashes, because it does mention in Quran, but it actually was not created from Quran. It was the method of punishment in 7th century or even in medieval Europe at that point of time, where beheading, amputation, even stoning, mentioned in medieval Christian time. It was the law of the land. So Quran acknowledged that, and yet the concept of justice, which is to be upheld, and not the form of punishment. Unfortunately, today, those who propagate or those who support the idea of amputation or lashing or even stoning say this is the form of punishment that needs to be done, and we disagree with that.
So, what is the current state of Sharia law in Malaysia, especially in Kelantan? This is something we are really curious. A lot of people say it's unconstitutional.
Yeah.
But at the same time, do you think it is something that would be good for Muslim, or how would it implicate Muslim women?
Yeah. Well, they wanted to introduce the private bill, to actually implement the Kelantan Sharia criminal bill that they have passed in 1993. So it was 11 years ago, to be exact.
Yeah, 11 years ago.
So they, seriously, this hudud bill that Kelantan and Terengganu have passed keep coming back. The difference and the worrying trend that we have today is that it has sort of the nod of the federal government. A minister from the federal government actually said that we need to assist Kelantan pushing for the implementation.
So finally they are working
hudud.
together.
Yes, because I think the renewed enthusiasm that they want to implement hudud is because what's happened in Brunei. Last year, the Sultan of Brunei announced that they are going to implement hudud. So,
and they are going to implement it in these few days, 22nd of April.
Yes. So Malaysians, especially I guess the state government of Kelantan are saying, hey, why not? Since Brunei, this rich, tiny nation, is now implementing hudud, we must do that as well. We've been, we have passed it, but of course we could not implement it back in 1993. And for Terengganu, I think it was in 2002, if I'm not mistaken. So why not do it? So what we want to put for Malaysians or even the federal government to think of is the whole legitimacy and on which juristic fiqh opinion does this hudud bill is based on. Because when we talk about Sharia, and the Sharia as the term that's understood today, like I said, Sharia is actually the divine message in Quran. But today Sharia is also whatever Islamic law, even though we have, every country in the Islamic world has different versions of Sharia law, and yet they say, it's a one divine message. So it is because the interpretations are different, because the school of law, like Mazhab Hanafi, Maliki, Hanbali, and Shafi, interpret it differently, and also Shia, of course. And so when it comes to Kelantan and Terengganu, we question whether the code that they want to implement actually, looking at all available ulama or Islamic scholars' opinions, or from where do they derive this? Even if it's a jumhur ulama opinion, means the majority of the ulama in the classical fiqh has agreed. But kudos to the past ulama. They have done their very best, and they are intellectuals in their time, their society. But they don't live in our society. They don't know the reality in our society. They don't know the advancements that women have achieved particularly Muslim
It's a different
women.
social structure altogether, isn't it?
It's different. Even when you talk about family relationship, it's different. Before, yes, in the ancient medieval time, yes, the men were the protective, because they are strong. They leave house. They earn living. They go to war to spread the lands. We don't have that kind of lifestyle today. Today, it's all about chasing career and husband and wife both together.
It's a more capitalistic world today.
Exactly. So the question again, which juristic opinion do they base this? And then to lock, stock, and barrel suddenly say this is from Allah. We beg to differ because it is not from Allah. What is for Allah is clearly in Quran, but this is not from Allah because it has juristic opinion.
Yeah. So let's say the bill in Kelantan is being passed and is being implemented as well. Let's say, how do you think it would implicate Muslim women in Kelantan?
A lot of problems. Yeah. For example, there is one issue from Surah An-Nur, verse 24, that talks about protection of women. Yeah, and those who launch a charge against chaste women and produce not 4 witnesses to support their allegations, lash them with 80 stripes and reject their evidence ever after. This ayat from Quran is actually protection of women or protection of a decent person, that you cannot just defame or slander anyone without, proof. So the burden of proof is on you. And yet, when Kelantan and Terengganu Hudud bill were introduced, because they took it from the Hudud law in Pakistan, because Pakistan has that, and they have turned because in Quran or even in traditional fiqh, there is no punishment for rape because rape was still not identified as a crime.
I see.
You see, this is another thing.
It wasn't even mentioned.
It wasn't even mentioned in traditional fiqh. So they are left to come up with a punishment for rape because they acknowledge that. So this very same verse of anyone who cannot produce 4 witnesses, then they are to be lashed. Yeah. To anyone who slander a chaste woman, protection for women, this verse is. And now it has turned that any woman who accuse anyone of rape, and she, that means the victim, is not able to produce 4 witnesses, she is to be lashed.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is one problematic. And actually we did raise that, when Terengganu wanted to implement their Sharia law, and they actually amended that, and to allow other kind of proof to be admissible. So again, human effort to change.
And who are part of this group of people that actually, make the law? Is it just the state assembly?
I think they refer to their own ulama. Like I said, they did borrow from they replicated a lot from the Hudud law and from Pakistan, and they might change a bit here and there. You see the word change. So if it's God's message, you cannot change anything. And then the worrying part is also that women cannot be a full witness in court herself. She has to have, she herself cannot be, she has to have another person with her, another woman. So the value of a woman's witness in a Sharia court, if the Sharia law is implemented.
This is for any crimes or just
any for criminal. For crimes, all the hudud punishment, and non-Muslims cannot be witness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, Malaysia is multiracial. I'm sure, of course, there are non-Muslims in Kelantan. And, how do you do that if the witness of a crime is a non-Muslim? And then what happens if the co-perpetrators are of different faith? Then how do you deal it? Because they say that, they always have this campaign to make sure that non-Muslims accept or agree to the hudud or the Sharia law, and said, don't worry, because they will not touch you. It's only for the Muslims. Yeah. This whole understanding, I don't know. We are Malaysians. or if you want to follow the Prime Minister's campaign of One Malaysia. And yet we have all these categories, that we punish Muslims because they've been bad. It's a personal sin against God, but we need to punish them because they're Muslims. Non-Muslim, you don't worry.
You can,
this is about
you can
Islam.
do whatever you want.
You can do it. But it's also untrue because, we've seen what happened in Kedah where they wanted to control the celebration of Chinese New Year.
Yeah, that's
That
true.
was like, 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen what happened in Ipoh where they arrested this young Chinese couple for, they were holding hands. They claimed they were just holding hands, but they were, for...
And also the infamous Allah issue.
The Allah issue, which is, it's very, sad what's happening in Malaysia because, it's such an unnecessary battle to fight for the name of God because, God said that He protects His own name. We don't need to incite hatred and to incite, all this that the non-Muslims or the Christians are out to get us because it's so untrue. So back to the Kelantan Code, these are some of the worrying trends that we're afraid of. Yeah. And the fact that death penalty was never even mentioned in the Quran, and yet it's for apostasy. Apostasy was never mentioned in the Quran of a death. It's just God said that God will not give them the guidance.
It was mentioned in the hadith, right?
It's a hadith, but again also on the practice of the Prophet. The Sahaba, the companion of the Prophet Abu Bakr. But that's a whole. The context is totally different. There's a element of mutiny, traitor, where death penalty was done. But apostasy itself in Quran was never in punishment because they say that hudud has to come from Quran. It's because it's a message from God, and that's why it's called hudud. But it was never mentioned in Quran.
So what about Muslim women in other Southeast Asian countries? I mean, we have the largest Muslim population in Indonesia. Are they facing similar threats in terms of the Sharia law, or do they even practice Sharia law?
They have their own Islamic family law. I know of that. Of course, there are some positive things that Indonesia have that we don't experience, and they are very clear on their secular law. But the worrying part is what's happening in Aceh because they have their own Sharia law that they have implemented for more than 4 years now, I think, and we hear cases of outright violation of women. Where Sharia police in 2010, Sharia police arrested a 20-year-old college student and her boyfriend for indecency, and the boyfriend was released, but she was detained, and then she was raped. She was allegedly raped by the 3 policemen that arrested her, and now 2 of them are on trial. So it is a crime already, it's in the court, and the third has escaped. And then this loose interpretation of the Sharia police themselves because they take the law into their own hands. So, they have went further from the spirit of Quran, which is to value or to respect human dignity. They have publicly humiliated a couple after they have caught them, paraded them naked on the street.
Naked?
The whole village.
Is it even Islamic to do that?
No, it's not Islamic at all.
Oh
You
my
don't
God.
do this. In Islam, human dignity is of the utmost importance. You don't shame anyone, not even a criminal. And then they have also regulated the women's dress. All over Indonesia, dressing is, up to them. But in Aceh, women must cover their hair, must cover their body. If they don't, if they go outside with even pants, then the Sharia police will go to them and, force them to wear a long skirt. And there was also a violation on from the Sharia police. There was a case, even a very sad case, a 16-year-old who was arrested because, they said that she was a sex worker. And, she was actually there with her a male relative to a party or a club. And they arrested her, and then they published her full name. It's out in the news, and she was so ashamed of it that she committed suicide.
Really?
Yes, this is in 2012. So these are some of the cases where you said that you are doing this Sharia law in the name of God and to to uphold the religion of Islam, and yet a lot of the cases have been proven that Sharia police, they themselves can abuse the power. I mean, let's face it, these are people with powers and, into their own hand, and they can just take action as they like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are at the end of our show. Any comment to add on the Muslim women's rights?
On the Muslim women's rights, the message from Sisters in Islam has always been clear. We need to reclaim the rights that Islam has gave us 1,400 years ago. It's in Quran, it's in the tradition of the Prophet. Even at the last message, the Hajj Wida, the farewell Hajj from the Prophet, it says that, respect your women, give them their rights. Over and over again in Quran and in the Hadith, it talks about valuing women and putting them at the same standard that you want to put yourself. I mean, for the men.
So
thank you, Arlene.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ratna, Osman.
Thank you.